Research paper guidelines, the conclusion, video number 6. So this is the last video in this series. It's not the last video about the research paper, however, but in this series it is. Let's go see what the conclusion's all about. Now, conclusions are final thoughts stemming from the subject of the paper. Sometimes it's a rounding off sentence at the end of your last supporting paragraph that's enough to close your paper. In this instance, what we are doing is no, I want a separate conclusion paragraph, okay? It is nice to try to leave your reader with an impression. Make your reader think or reflect on your topic. A strong conclusion will provide a sense of closure to the essay while again placing your concepts in a somewhat wider context. It will also, in some instances, add a stimulus to further thought. I find that so interesting that when your reader is done reading your essay, you're encouraging them in a way to think about your topic even some more. That's cool. That's the point of writing. Since no two essays are the same, no single formula will automatically generate a conclusion for you. But the following guidelines will help you to construct a suitable beginning and end for your essay. In this case, we're talking about the end. Here's an example from students a little while ago. So this is a conclusion I received in one of the research papers. In conclusion, flooding is becoming an increasingly more frequent problem. For the most part, we can stop many of the contributing factors. Humans cause most of the problems that trigger this disaster, such as building in areas prone to flooding, deforestation that is making the ground less able to absorb water, and pollution. If we do not change our ways, the impacts are going to get worse. People have to deal with the consequences, so they should care enough to change their ways before flooding becomes an even bigger issue. You'll notice that we have somewhat of a general sentence at the beginning, which is really good. You want to ease them into it. And then you have somewhat of a summary of what the essay discussed previously. And then here you have really the responsibility being put on us, right? So we should care enough to change our ways before flooding becomes an even bigger issue. Awesome. That leaves me thinking, okay, am I contributing to this problem? So that's a really effective conclusion. You can see it's not that complicated. Some general advice about conclusions. A conclusion is not just a summary of your points or a restatement of your thesis. If you wish to summarize, and often you must, so in our language, I saw the word language here. So in our situation, you have to summarize, but you have to do it in fresh language. In other words, they don't want you to repeat word for word what it is you said before. Remind the reader of how the evidence you've presented has contributed to your thesis. The conclusion, like much of the rest of the paper, involves critical thinking. Reflect upon the significance of what you've written. Try to convey some closing thoughts about the larger implication of your argument. Broaden your focus a bit at the end of the essay. A good last sentence leaves your reader with something to think about, a concept in some way illuminated by what you've written in the paper. For most essays, one well-developed paragraph is sufficient for a conclusion. In your case, it is. Don't write, a 2-paragraph conclusion. Your essays won't be long enough for that. So how do you write an interesting and effective conclusion? Here are some strategies that maybe will help. Remember, this is not a 1 plus 2 plus 3. This is a and/or situation. So if your essay deals with a contemporary problem, you could warn readers of the possible consequences of not attending to the problem. You could recommend a specific course of action that you've discovered in your research. You could use a quotation or an expert opinion to lend some authority to what you are saying. That's interesting. You could also give facts or visual image to drive home the ultimate point of your paper. If your discipline encourages personal reflection, and in this case, you can if you want to. When they say discipline, they mean the course that you're taking. Illustrate your concluding point with a relevant narrative drawn from your own life experiences. Totally up to you, once again, dependent on your topic. Return to an anecdote, an example, or a quotation that you introduced in your introduction, but add further insight that derives from the body of your essay. That's an interesting way to loop your essay right back to point number one. In a science or social science paper, mention worthwhile avenues for future research on your topic. So that's the conclusion. And of course, at any time, if you have any issues, you let me know. And there will be more videos, of course, mainly about the MLE format. But if you have any questions about your conclusion, you know where to reach me.